So the question was, what is an employee handbook and is this thing required or what's the origin of it, right? So an employee handbook is simply a book that we give to employees, usually in a digital form today, that contains information about our workplace and it also usually contains lots of rules. But let's pause right there. Employee handbooks are not required. There's nothing anywhere in the law that requires that we actually have something called an employee handbook. An employee handbook is simply a tool to deliver information to our employees. Or we could actually think of it as like a car or a truck or even like a box or a package. Like we've got to deliver this information to our people, and we decided to put it all into a container, and then we labeled that container an employee handbook, right? So a handbook is just simply a small book, usually that you can hold in your hand, put in your pocket, that contains easy to understand information to do a job. It's usually something that's like a reference type document that somebody would have. So it's not like as big as a normal book, but it's intended to be kind of a shorter, smaller, easier to understand book that people can actually grab, read, and understand in order to do something. So the concept of like a handbook or an employee handbook, well, the concept of a handbook is actually something that dates back to like the 1500s, which is just simply a written document that contains information that we want to give to somebody, but kind of something shorter than like a big book, if you will. And this idea carried forward over time, and it was actually in the early 1900s that companies first began to create employee handbooks and give these handbooks out to employees. But they were very different than they are today because back in the early 1900s, there were over a million fewer laws tied to employment stuff than there are today. So, in the last 100 years, there have been over a million employment laws added in the US. And with those laws came rules and things that we had to do. And companies decided to take those required things that they have to do and put them in the handbook as a way to deliver that information to employees. Um, let me give you an example. So, way back in the 1900s, there's a company called the Heinz Company, Heinz Ketchup, H.J. Heinz, and they actually had a booklet that they referred to as an employee handbook. There was like a little introduction. I'll actually read it to you right now. It says their handbook from the 1920s said that this booklet is presented to you along with a hearty welcome to the 57 family. It is intended to be not only a book of rules, but also a book of information by means of which we may cooperate to give each other the best service possible. H.J. Heinz Company, like every other large organization, must have rules and regulations. We have tried to make ours as few as possible. They are designed to enable us to work in harmony and with a true cooperative spirit. Read this booklet carefully and ask your foreman or the head of your department about anything you do not understand. And this was their intro to that booklet that they gave to all their employees. And it contained some basic information about the Heinz company, its purpose, its background, and so forth and so on. But the early idea was that we want to give employees a way to understand our company and understand what it is we sort of expect from them as an employee, really sort of like an orientation, if you will. Like, hey, let's orient you to who we are so that you can better understand our expectations and the way that we operate is actually a really smart culture building step. When we talk about culture, meaning the way that we behave or act together at work, workplace culture at least, this is a great way to just introduce to someone who's brand new, this is the information about our company, how we act, how we operate, how we treat each other, so forth and so on. Fast forward, and these laws start to get created really in earnest in the 1960s and 70s and 80s. And all of these laws that get created require companies to give their employees certain things, to inform their employees about certain things, and in some cases have them sign documents saying that they read and understood the things that we gave them, right? We call these things policies because they're rules that we have adopted as a company, and we've then given those rules to our employees, and we need them to understand them and to follow them, right? And the employee handbook became an easy way to deliver that information right up front to every employee that comes in. So just kind of a quick just recap of what we just talked about. Employee handbooks, origin early 1900s. Fast forward to today, they often contain a lot of policies and information and rules that we want employees to understand. There's no requirement that you have an employee handbook. Is it a good idea? Sure. You could call it a policy guide. You could split up the handbook into two handbooks. You could have like a here's our culture handbook and all about us as a company and what we're about and how we operate. And you could separate from that have a different handbook or a different collection of information that's just like a policy guide that people go through those policies. So again, there's no legal requirement that you have a handbook. There are laws that require that we get information in front of our employees. There are laws that require that the employees that receive that information read and understood, and or were able to acknowledge that they understood that information. But employee handbooks themselves are not legally required.